Good afternoon, everybody. I'm speaking to you from a very sunny Japan, 9th of April, in the afternoon on a Sunday. It's still cold out there, but it's blue sky, not a cloud out there. Now, I was speaking to my dad yesterday. It's Easter over in England at the moment, and he says they've got a pretty decent spring going on there. Beer gardens are full, and it's going to break on Monday, which is perfect timing because you've had your weekend, so you'll get your Monday to recover. Easter's not in calendar over here, which does not bother me in the slightest. But what we have had over here this week is, because it's the start of April here, and in the start of April in Japan, the new school year starts. Now, everywhere else around the world, it's September. Everybody starts at the start of autumn, the start of fall. But here in Japan, it's the start of April. And carrying on from last week's episode about the cherry blossoms, the only reason that they have their graduation here in April is cherry blossoms are blooming. So all the kids can get under the cherry blossom trees for the school photos. And it's a nice start to the year. They're all under there. The cherry blossoms are quietly dropping off the trees, and you get your class photo taken. It does make it very nice. But when you come to graduating, which is a plus for the kids in Japan, if these kids want to go and study abroad in an English-speaking country, they finish school at the end of March. So they are then off from the end of March till when the university year starts in September, wherever they choose to study. So they've got a full solid 6 months off. And for them of you who have got kids who are graduating from an English-speaking high school and they want to come here to study, they've also got 6 months off because the year doesn't start here till April, which is great. Now, I went to my daughter's welcoming ceremony. Yeah. So she started junior high school, or in the UK, middle school. So she's 12 going on 13. So you do 6 years at your first school, and then you do 6 years at your junior high and your high school, which is the same school. But it's junior high and high school, 3 of each. In Japan, you've got to stay at school until you're 18. No ifs, no buts. You're here till you're 18. Like when I was at school in England, I think Sunak's put it up. You've got to stay till you're 17 now. But when I were at school, I were out of the door as soon as I fucking could. Gone at 16. But yeah, here it's 18. Now, this welcoming ceremony, talk about the kids being put on a pedestal. So I'll talk about the junior high school one first, because that's the one that I've attended most recent. So you go in and there's chairs all about in this huge gym. And there's the stage at the far end and empty seats at the front for these new kids to sit on. So what happens is there's a space that's right down the middle of the gym, and there's parents on the left side and the right side. And you sit in order of what class your kid's in. Now, because it goes from 1A to 1E, does my daughter's school year. 1A, 1B, 1C. You get it. So she's in 1E, so we were sat at back. So the kids are announced. They don't do it name by name. The name is announced. So the kids start walking in. 1A is first. Talk about the fucking about. Let's talk about that fucking about. So the kids walk in, everybody's clapping. Yay, yay, yay. And this is just the first class that's coming. So the kids walk to the front and then they sort of peel off to the left and the right, and then they've got 2 or 3 rows where A class sits. Now, I don't know what happened, but this seemed to take about a good 5 minutes to get them sat in the correct seats, which they'd been practicing this for a couple of days. You'd have thought they'd have got. So then B came in, they fucked that up. C, D, and then my daughter's class came in, 1E. And that teacher has got it locked down. From what I saw from just the simple act of walking into a gym, he got them in, he got them sat down, and we carried on. And I think he'd said to the kids, look, let's not bother with these masks anymore. Because the masks seemed to thin out as the kids walked in. Everybody in A class, they all had the masks on. And then B, 80%, 60%, 40%. And then my daughter's class, none of them had it on. So he got them seated so quickly, which makes me think that this fella knows how to go on. All the while we're having seating problems, you've still got to carry on clapping. Yay, go, yay. And I was just comparing it to when I started school. Now, if we do a Tales of the Unexpected thing and just go back in time to 1976. Now, it's very similar when your kid starts elementary school here, when they start first school. There's all that bullshit clapping and cheering and well done, you're starting school. They make it out to be you're doing something special. You know, you're so brave because you're starting school. And you're not, you're just starting school. So why are you telling the kids that they're doing something special? Because they're not. They're doing what every other kid is doing in September. They're changing years or they're starting a new school. It's nothing special. It gets done every year. But it is made such a big deal of here that when I look back to when I first started school, it's something I don't recognise. Now, going back to 1976, and it would have been the middle of July 1976, St Matthew's School in West Bowling, Bradford, West Yorkshire, in England. I was 5 years old because we started at 5. You start 5 years old there. So we go up to me and my mum, and there were a few other kids on my street that were starting at the same time. And we went up there. And I remember being sat next to my mother in school hall in gym. And I was looking at a little kid looking around like this. And all the teachers were sat at a desk, scowling. What the first thought was they were scowling. Now, I were looking forward to going to school. This was July. I had another 6 weeks to get it all sorted. And the one teacher, I think he must have been headmaster, he started berating parents, mothers. There were no fathers there. Fathers were working. Dads in 70s, they weren't taking time off for important shit like this. That were the wife's job. Yeah, boomers. They did the fathers, they didn't give a fuck. They were going out and earning. The mother sorted that crap out. And the thing that sticks with me to this day was, I can't remember him talking about we should know his ABCs. I didn't know it. I didn't remember him talking about we should be reading, because I couldn't read when I started school. Math, nope. I could play with my Lego and put a Meccano thing together. That were about my level at 5 years old. But reading and writing, no chance. No chance. But the thing I remember was the headmaster saying to all the mothers, your kids need to know how to go to the toilet. Because his exact words were, because my staff of teachers here are not in the business of cleaning up after your kids if they want to go to the toilet. So you need to get them home. It's July, you've got 6 weeks, and you need to teach them how to wipe their arse. And I remember him saying, arse, because I laughed. And I looked up at my mother, and then I looked around at the other mothers, and nothing. Nothing. And he said it again. He says, you must make sure they know how to wipe their arse. So, yeah, that was it. And I thought, oh, Jesus fucking Christ. I kind of knew at 5 how to sort myself out. But there was some parents that were looking down at the kids and going, oh, God, this is going to be a messy summer. So off we went. Now, I go home and then I start writing out letters. Say, Mum, does that say out? Fucking 3 Y's, a couple of Z's and A. No, that means nothing. What about this? No. And I was just writing random letters. So, and I'm not having a go at my parents because everybody were the same. Boomers, fucking boomers, they were not going to take time out to learn the 6 weeks they've got off. They weren't going to take time out to try and learn them how to read or how to write. They had the business of doing the washing in twin tub. You know, they weren't going to sit down with the kids and teach them how to read. That's not how it were done. You know, you're getting out under feet. Get out of the house now and come back when you're hungry. 5 years old. I'd go up, drive, I'd turn left, I'd go down to the bottom of Birch Lane, I'd go get my friend Lee Simpson, and we'd go over the back of his garden, and where the train went from Bradford to Halifax, he had a train tunnel behind the back of his house, and it were covered in grass. So we'd get some cardboard, and we'd slide down that all day. All day. And there'd be some times where I'd miss my lunch and we'd go home at night and, where have you been? I've just been on tunnel. I remember being 5 years old going in that tunnel as trains would come past and we'd have to push ourselves back into these little workman thing as the train went past. This is 5 years old. Before we started school. Now, we'd been round to a lot of different schools before my mother plugged on St Matthew's, because St Matthew's were at top of Birch Lane. So you'd walk up to the top and then you'd turn right on Ring Road and it was just there. But Lee Simpson went off to this Catholic school and we went down to this Catholic school and I remember thinking we must have stepped back in time because as we were walking down corridors, these kids were all running around. There were no girls. It was a boys' school. And as soon as they saw a grown-up, they threw themselves against wall with their back to walls until we walked past. And my mate's mum, Lee Simpson's mum, looking at my mum going, "It's great this, isn't it? It's great this." And my mother said to my dad when we got home, he said, "I think it must be like going to school in Germany. I'm not sending him there." Because, and we want Catholics. But apparently that were the good school with the education, but they beat the fuck out of the kids. They beat the shit out of the kids. Now, in an elementary school, you've got your 5 or 6 year olds that are starting school in Japan. So they have another welcome ceremony. Now, I'm harking back to when my kid started school 4 years ago. So what happens is the kids that are in the top class, the 12-year-olds, on the welcoming ceremony will come down, they'll all get a kid each, and they'll walk in with the first graders, and they'll sit them down in the seat, and off you go. Opening ceremony, then it's finished, and then they'll go get them and they'll walk them out. And then these sixth graders, for the first 3 months of the year, they've got the kid, which they'll show around the school, and they'll make sure he don't get bullied, so the kid feels comfortable, the boys and the girls. I think, Jesus Christ. My first day at school, there were kids that had never been away from the mothers before. Never been away from the mothers before for more than an hour. So we went in and we sit down. And then the mothers stand up to leave. And then I didn't. But I would say a good 30% of these kids started crying. And they're going running over to the mums. And the teacher, she must have been in her 50s. She's just saying to the mothers, get out now. So they got out and there were kids at the door banging on the door. And there were some mothers that were hanging around because they didn't want to see the kids in despair. And she's just saying, get them away. And you kids sit down. So there were none of this 6th grade business where you were getting showed around the school and getting looked after. You had to deal with it. So the kids were crying. One kid pissed himself. We had one fat kid in his class and he pissed himself. I was sat next to him and I was looking at teacher and she was saying stuff and writing stuff on board. I had no idea what we're getting written on board. And I felt a splashing against, because I had shorts on, against my ankle. And what the fuck's that? And I looked down and this kid were crying and he's got a pool of piss under him. And I'm put, Mace, he's weed himself. And the fact that I'd stopped her, she looked round at me and she glared at me. And I thought she were going to come at me with the ruler that she had in her hand. And I think she would have done if this kid hadn't have peed himself. Because she ran over that kid, she grabbed him by the scruff of his neck and she hit him with ruler and told him to go into the bathroom and clean up himself. And we were told to just move away from it. So he went in there, and I think the parents were wise to this stuff because they must have been told. And he had a fresh pair of underpants and a fresh pair of shorts, but he had to clean himself up. Nobody were helping him. And he was just this 5-year-old fat kid. Pissy Price. Yeah, that were his name. That's what he got called. Until I left that school, he were Pissy Price. Yeah, so you had to sort yourself out. Now, break time. So it's your first break time. You have no idea what to do because the thing is, the teachers had told the parents what would be going on in school because I think it must have changed a bit from when they were going to school in 40s to when I'm going to school in mid-70s. So they told the parents, but it's the 70s. The parents told you fuck all because it would take time out of their day. It'd take time out of their day to explain what were going on. So it would never explain to me what were happening. So you'd do an hour or so, an hour and a half, and then you'd have a break. And off you get pushed out into the schoolyard. Fucking prison yard when you're 5 years old. So you kind of know a couple of people, a couple of kids that are on your street. Maybe one of them's in your class. So you stick with that kid. There might have been a couple of kids that you made friends with on desk, on table that you were sat at. So you go play with them kids. So we'd be out, and then the rest of the school would come out. So we didn't know how to go on. And then I remember there being 2 levels. And so you've got your playground by school, and then there were a grass verge, and then a kind of five-a-side tarmac pitch, or it might have been a tennis court, but it were a big drop from that top playground to bottom playground with a kind of grassy verge in between at an angle. And I remember 5 minutes into this first playtime, one of the kids that were in our class, the older kids had got him and they were giving it 1, 2, 3, and they were throwing him down this grass verge, and he landed at bottom crying. Thinking, where the fuck has my mum and dad dropped me off here? I had no idea how to go on. So then you go back in. So you had to change your shoes. So you change your shoes into your indoor shoes at the entrance, and then you walk down the corridor to where first years were. And as I'm walking down the corridor, this 6-year kid, who seemed like a fucking giant to me, he'd have been about 11. Yeah, he'd have been 11. I was 5. As I'm walking past him, he turns and he kicks me up the arse. Now, you had these black pumps, these black rubber pumps that you had as your indoor shoes in elementary school, in first school. And I remember his foot, his toes going up my arsehole. I remember a distinct feeling of feeling his toes in the crack of my arse. And that's the first ever time I had the experience of getting a dead arse. Now, you know a dead arm where somebody smacks you in the arm and you lose the feeling in your arm. Well, a dead arse is when somebody kicks you so sweetly in the arsehole that your arse goes all tingling, you can't feel it. And I'm like, what the fuck is that? First day of school, first 2 hours of first school that I've ever experienced, and I'm coming in from the school, and a giant of a fucking man, it seemed to me, has taken a swipe at me, kicked me up the arse, and now I can't feel my arse. What the fuck? And I got back, and I couldn't sit right, and I was fidgeting because I couldn't sit right, and then I got a whack. I got a whack round back at head. Darren, sit still. Bang. And you get a smack round back at head. And this is the first introduction to elementary school for me. And it was such a marked difference to what my kid was seeing with his first year. Now you fast forward to my daughter starting middle school and upper school. I mean, if she were in England now, she'd be last year of middle school. So you're talking starting upper school. When you go to upper school, I remember walking down that drive to White Manor. Obviously, it was raining. It was foggy, and then it just kicked off immediately. The teacher, my form teacher, come in. Is having a cig, sits down, takes everybody's names. Right, we're not doing out for an hour, so do whatever you want. And that was my introduction to upper school, to high school. Now, I don't know how much it's changed in the UK now, because my kids are never going to be in the UK schooling system. But obviously it's got to have changed from what it was. And the thing that you don't get here, that kids that were educated in the 70s in the UK got there, is a lot of these teachers were veterans from World War II. So these headmasters had probably been in the trenches somewhere in Europe or in the Far East, fucking getting shot at by Nazis or Japanese, and they've come back. They've come back and got themselves a teaching certificate, and they're out there in the schools with their fucking PTSD, looking at these little kids having flashbacks, thinking, fuck me, it's Tenko time, and kids would be fucking beaten. Beaten. By teachers that had seen action. And you go home and you say to your parents, I got fucking beaten at school. Beaten. Look at the bruises on my arms. Look where he hit me with a cane. Well, what did you do? I didn't do anything. But he still hit me. Well, you must have done something. Because the boomers never listened. The boomers never listened to you. And it wasn't just my parents. If you are raised by parents that were born in the 40s or the 50s, you've got to remember that they were raised by parents who were left to raise the kids themselves while their husbands were out fighting in World War II. So not only were they not listened to, it were a bit of a seen, not heard. But these boomers that raised us, they'd not seen any difficulties. They'd not had to go out and fight wars. So they decided, right, oh yeah, we want kids, but we don't want our life to change. So they would still live the life of childless couples while at the same time raising kids. So you were kicked out of the house. So you were sat next to your parents at a working men's club watching a shite cabaret while everybody got pissed. You were dragged off to do this and do that which you had no interest in at all because they didn't listen to you and they were still in the seen not heard mode. And that were boomers for you. Now, what I see here is the pendulum swung completely the opposite way. And from what I hear on news and hear on other podcasts, it's the same everywhere else, where everything is about your kids now. Everything's about your kids. You've got to listen to them. You've got to listen to the problems. You've got to help them. They aren't allowed to get bullied. And all sorts of new things that have come into play now. Now, it gets turned up to 10 here. It gets turned up to 10 in Japan because everything's so, it's the manners and everything's got to be sorted out by the parents. The kids aren't allowed to sort it out themselves. If there's bullying going on, the kid will tell the parents and the parents will go and sort it out. The kids aren't allowed to do anything here. Now, the thing I've learnt with raising your kids here, where there is a Japanese parent and a parent of another foreign land, is they get the light and the dark. Or they certainly do in my house. Now, whereas my wife is all sweetness and light, she has got the patience of an angel. An angel. She will listen to the kids. She will care for them. She'll look after them. And she's just nice. She's just nice, which I still can't understand why she's married somebody completely opposite to herself. Whereas if the kids come to me with a problem that they can sort out themselves, I'm like, sort it out your fucking self. If the kids have cut their hands, wash your hands and put a plaster on yourself. Do it yourself. So they get no advice from me. The only advice they get from me is to go out and get it your fucking self. Do it yourself. Do it yourself. Which is what I went through. I remember arsing about at B&Q with my friend, and we were on the trolleys. We had some trolleys in car park, and we were running them into each other. And where the trolleys go in and the baby seat goes up like that as they're stacked together. Well, in B&Q, there were no stop on the baby seat guard, and it would come right over. And I didn't know this. So I run into the back of this trolley. The gate bounced right over and hit me square on the bridge of the nose. Broke my nose. My nose is bleeding. I'm covered in blood. I were 12-year-old. My nose were off to an angle. So I come off at Euroway State. I walks over at Bridge, Bit Trail railway lines. I went through Horses Fields and I got home. And I said, Dad, look at my nose. Look at my nose. I've broke it. I need to go to hospital. And we were working in garage on summer. And he had this rag, this oily rag. And he wiped the blood off. And he just got his finger, he's got his index finger and his thumb, and he just snapped it back. And it was straight. Now, in his defence, he probably saved himself about 2 hours sitting in St. Luke's waiting for my nose to get sorted or reset. Now, he reset it himself and I were fine. I could breathe, because I can remember walking home and I couldn't breathe through one nostril. I couldn't breathe through the left nostril. I remember that clearly. And he put it back and I could breathe. So, not having the medical degree, my dad, he probably did in a second what they were going to spend 2 hours doing at St. Luke's. And I was sorted. But that was childhood in the 70s and the 80s. Now, if my kids come home with a broken nose and I snapped it back, I think the divorce papers would get served over here because it's completely different. These boomers, when they were in the 60s, you know, the parents were still wearing shirt and ties and a suit to go to work or to go out to pub. They'd be putting on a shirt and tie. And then it were all motorbikes and leather jackets and rock and roll and the 60s. And then the 70s, it sort of went into drugs and acid and all that sort of stuff. And then the 80s, you can just fuck right off with the 80s because that were a right load of shite. And then when we started coming to age, in 90s, it sort of come out of the doldrums. And you've, especially in the north of England, were fantastic. And then you've got your raves, you've got your ecstasy, you've got your acid. We were enjoying ourselves. We were fucking enjoying ourselves and we were hurting nobody. We were hurting nobody. The drugs we were taking, the drink we were drinking, it were all peace and love. And we were doing it out of the way. You'd get sent a frequency on a radio. You would listen to that radio for an hour. They would tell you where everybody was meeting. You'd go drive to a field in the middle of nowhere in the north of England. There was no houses or anything for miles around. There'd be a DJ and it'd just be people in the 20s dancing and enjoying themselves. And they didn't like it. This was our 60s. And the kids that had grown up in the 60s didn't want us to enjoy themselves as much as they did. And it was only then that they decided, oh, we'll start parenting now. We'll start parenting now. And they shut it down. You could not, I think a gathering of more than 12 were against the law. I think 12 is a number that sticks with me for some reason. And you couldn't do that. You couldn't do that. But the ecstasy was good. The acid was good. The music was fantastic. There were gigs every weekend along that M62 corridor. And you would go off to towns that you'd never think of going to before. You'd have Chester, Warrington, Widnes, Warrington Par Hall. Why would I ever go there? Fucking brilliant venue. Brilliant town. You know, Manchester, Sheffield. You'd go over to Hull. All these little towns and cities that you'd go and watch gigs in. And you'd spend the weekend there. And it was fantastic. They didn't like it. They didn't like it. They wanted to stop us enjoying ourselves. But we're having none of it. Just like they did in the 60s. But now, the parents that you see now, especially here, I don't think my kids are ever going to be able to enjoy that. Firstly, here in Japan, there's no drugs. There's no drugs. Smoking a joint is on par with mainlining heroin or smoking crack. They have it all on the same level. You get caught with a joint here, you're going in the big house for a minimum of 3 months. And while you might get away with it, no, you don't get away with it. Because they go out of the way to tell everybody that's important in your life why you're being locked up. So they'll go to your boss. Even if it were me, I'm in my 50s, they would go to your boss and ring him up. Right, he's not going to be back to work for 3 months because he was caught with a joint. So that's your job gone. And then, but if you've got 3 different jobs, they'll ring 3 different people to tell them why you're not there. Yeah. So this is why in Japan now, the music is awful, and it always has been awful because there's been no influence in drugs. You look at a boy band, any boy band, you could put them all on the wall. Any boy band in Japan and throw a dart in the wall. And they look exactly the same. Almost as if it's a trans man. All of them. It's all boy bands. It's like Take That looking more feminine. And the music's rubbish. It's awful. And it's all the same. I liken it to Christian rock. There's absolute no fucking edge to it, and it offends nobody. Whereas you want your rock, you want your fucking rock and roll or your rock or the music I grew up with in the 90s to grab you by the bollocks, to make you look and turn to a woman that's to your left or to your right, and you look and you make that contact, and the next thing you do, you're French kissing her, and you're aware she's coming back to your hotel or she's going home with you. That's not happening here. That's not happening here. And I feel sorry for him. I feel sorry for him. So what I will do as a parent is, I won't parent. I'll let my kids do whatever they want. Oh, what? I can't do that. But that was just my meanderings on how, when I first started school to when my kids started school, it's all very saccharine here. They've got no fear of getting hurt here. Even though these 2 kids of mine are the only foreigners that are going to these schools, they're not experiencing any kind of racism. When I think back to the 70s and those 2 Asian twins from Pakistan, those 2 little girls in my class, getting shit from the teachers, getting shit from other kids, compared to my kids now, who, like I say, they're the only foreigners in our school. There's no other foreigners around here. And they're getting no shit whatsoever, which I suppose is how it should be, but they're not experiencing any kind of negativity. Maybe they will in the future, and I'll have something else to talk to you about. But as of now, everything seems to be fine. Which, is it a good thing not to struggle? Is it a good thing not to struggle? Or would I prefer them struggling? I don't know. Anyway, that's my rant over. So that was episode 92. Again, excuse me. Again, the ratings are through the roof. And I don't know why. It's because I'm doing it on my own. You enjoy a northerner ranting. Fucking plenty of them in me. But please just keep on downloading this shite. Not shite. It's not shite. Just please keep downloading it. It warms the cockles. And I'll see you next week. Thank you very much.